Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back, and I am back because once again somebody has been wrong on the internet, and as always it is my job to step up and correct them, and it's not an easy job. I get a lot of stick, you know, stuff like this. Yeah, this guy's obviously caught me red-handed, wanting to know who pays me to chill out while I'm making these videos. Well, you know what? I'm done lying. It's time to tell the truth. What can I say? The old ones are always the best. Now, just like all my videos, this one is brilliant. So just for that sheer display of arrogance, please hit that subscribe button. Now, who has been wrong on the internet this week?
Good morning, everybody. Dr. David Cartland here.
Yes, it's Dr. David Cartland, definitely a public figure with his almost 250,000 followers on Twitter. Now I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, Cats, what has he said that's so wrong? Well, I think for this particular video, context is very important. I think it's important that we all understand why I am scrutinising his comments and why I think they are worthy of scrutiny. And for that, I've got to go back in time and recap a story that we have seen once or twice on this channel before about Andrew Bridgen. If you've seen the story before, this is a very short recap. And if you haven't seen the story before, then it's just bizarrely hilarious. Now, I'm going to have to be a little bit careful with how I phrase this because last time I played this clip in its entirety on my channel, YouTube didn't like it and I got in a little bit of trouble. So, introducing the guy on the left. This is Andrew Bridgen, the ex-UK politician. And on the right, it is Jim Ferguson, also an ex-politician and now a podcast host. Anyway, Andrew Bridgen, while being a serving MP, appeared to speak with Jim Ferguson on his podcast and things got pretty bizarre, starting here.
I believe they knew in advance what they were doing and that there is something far darker, Andrew, far darker, far more nefarious going on here. And I've had top doctors on my channel here, which is on a regular basis, who have said...
And this is where I've got to step in and start paraphrasing, otherwise YouTube will get me in trouble again. Apparently the top doctor said something like this.
Ooh, hello. You know that guy what invented Microsoft? Yeah, that he's dead rich, isn't he, that one? Yeah, well, apparently people like him, they don't like it in crowded spaces when there's lots and lots and lots of people around. And perhaps, they said, maybe people like that Microsoft guy might like it if there was, you know, a few less people on the planet, if you get what I mean.
Oh, really? Well, I don't entirely disagree with you.
It's difficult when you see everything that's going on come to any other conclusion. I think, you know, as unpalatable as that is, I always think we have to live in the world how it is, not how we'd like it to be. And, you know, that would appear to me to be a very credible explanation.
Yeah, it was a totally ridiculous thing to suggest, especially from a sitting MP. But Andrew Bridgen, he was determined, and he decided he wanted to recruit a team of experts and whistleblowers to take it to the very top of the Metropolitan Police.
I actually wrote on Monday to Mark Crowley, the Commissioner for the Metropolitan Police, and I've asked for a 3-hour meeting where I'll bring 15 world experts and whistleblowers who will lay out the evidence.
And here is his list of whistleblowers and experts, and what a team it is. It contains a woman, very possibly a flat earther, that doesn't believe the ISS exists because, in her own words, she doesn't understand how people might deliver guitars and gorilla costumes to it, or something like that.
Also, then you see them like playing the guitar or wearing a gorilla suit, and it's like, well, how did that get there? Who posted that? What kind of delivery service delivers to some machine that's going at 17,000 miles an hour?
The list also contained our old friend John O'Looney, the guy who by now I'm sure you're all familiar with. He's the man that posted out to 62,000 people on Twitter that he was going to buy himself a UV torch to see if vaccinated people illuminate. It contained ex-professional football player Matt Letizia, who now appears with Tom Numbers on podcasts where Tom tells him all about the flux capacitor from Back to the Future and somehow how that is involved in whatever the hell he thinks it's involved in.
Which is, Matt, and my topic we always talk about is the flux capacitor. And you're talking about it being time travel and being affecting time. So I think that when we were getting the flux capacitor stuff over the last few months, 182, that comes to our jury and council, and it's like, why did I get that? Why did you get that? Why did we get synchronicity between ourselves? And why are we here with Mark and with Ricky? And we've seen ships, and it's like we're all connected.
Matt, have you seen ships?
Not clearly. I do in the summer. I do like sit out in the garden on my hammock and just have a look up at the stars.
And of course, that list contained our new friend, Dr. David Cartland. And if there's any doubt in your mind after seeing that brilliant reenactment that Andrew Bridgen is actually agreeing to some sort of idea of some sort of depopulation thing. Let me dispel that for you with this little clip from an interview taken just a couple of days ago.
It's clear that we have a depopulation agenda.
No, Andrew, that's a load of rubbish. And for the purpose of any YouTube reviewers who are having a look at this, I'm about to go on now and debunk his source of information for that claim. So that is a seamless link to what is his source of information for that claim.
You only have to read Klaus Schwab's book, which was written some time ago now, that the population of the world will be reduced between 2020 now and 2050.
Ah, Klaus Schwab's book. Now, I do get a lot of people coming on my channel calling me all sorts of names, telling me that I need to read Klaus's book because the truth is all in there. A lot of these people, I can only assume, are very highly educated scientists and professors with PhDs, etc. Because it seems to me that they've learned so much about this book and so much about science that all that extra knowledge has pushed out any knowledge that they may have previously had about, I don't know, simple things like punctuation.
Hello, it's me, Jojo, again. I've left this puzzle, see if you know what it means. Okay. The Great Reset Conspiracy Theory, OMG. Who are you? Klaus Schwab? No, that's not a question. It would have a question mark. Let's go again. The Great Reset Conspiracy Theory, OMG. Who are you? Klaus Schwab from the World Economic Forum wrote a book with the title, Jesus, This is Difficult to Watch. It's bloody difficult to read.
So yeah, I get a lot of comments about that book. But back to Andrew Bridgen. How is this plan supposed to work?
And it will be through repeated pandemics, wars and famines.
That's bollocks. So what Andrew Bridgen is referring to here is the quote you see on screen, which supposedly was taken from Klaus Schwab's book. The only problem is, and it's quite a big problem for Andrew Bridgen, is that it simply isn't in that book at all. You see, I have a PDF copy of that book, and I'd like to point out to the people who subscribe to this conspiracy theory that when you have a book, those letters on the front page are, the title, but if you open it up and scroll through, you can see there's lots more words. And if you read them, you kind of get a better understanding of what the book is about. Give that a go. Anyway, the beauty of a PDF is you can search for keywords and phrases, of course, and this quote is simply not in the book at all. But it is in this one here, The Story of the Committee of 300 by Dr. John Coleman. It's basically a conspiracy theory about 300 people, blah, blah, blah. It's a load of horse shit. But if you do the keyword search, you will find that exact quote from this book, not Klaus Schwab's. Anyway, this video really isn't about Andrew Bridgen. We've now caught you up on the story. It's about Dr. David Cartland. So with that in mind, let's talk a little bit more about Andrew Bridgen and what he's been up to lately. Yeah, since being ousted as MP by losing the election, Andrew Bridgen has taken to Twitter to ask the question, was the election rigged? And my answer to that is, well, given the fact that you didn't come absolute bottom, who knows? As we all know by now, Dr. John Campbell released an utterly absurd video on self-assembling nanobots before he thought better of that and deleted it. But he didn't delete it, of course, before Andrew Bridgen decided to tweet it out to all his followers. But perhaps most spectacularly of all, he decided to sit down and have a chat with the one and only very, very expert Mark Steele. Now, if you don't know Mark Steele, I did make a video a while ago where I actually attended one of his lectures, if you can call it that, where he told me that direct energy weapons have been invented to burn trees from the inside out, trees that just happen to be in the middle of an already established forest fire. It was quite the experience.
Remember Greece? Burning trees from the inside out. Now, how do you get a tree to burn from the inside out? Ionospheric radiators, right? They are direct energy weapon systems, okay? They use the dielectric properties of the tree, right, to create that temperature increase so it bursts into flames.
And here is a clip of that conversation where I genuinely think here what Mark Steele is saying is too off-the-wall crazy, even for our old friend Andrew Bridgen. Here he seems to be implying that 5G technology in London is a cause of, I don't know, local climate change.
Levels of radiation, I believe London's going to get hot. It can get a lot hotter. It's going to get a lot hotter. But some of those radiation levels to the body, and especially in the sub-gig, which is the main blanket coverage for 5G, causes thermal temperature increases internally in the body and the dissipation of that. So Colin's talking about, this problem with climate and temperature increases in the city. Well, now we know why. So I think we'll wrap it up there. But
And I've got to hand it to Andrew Bridgen. I think this is the moment here where he realises he's speaking to someone who's talking absolute shite.
Now we know why.
So there we go, that is the Andrew Bridgen bit definitely done. Now let's talk about Dr. David Cartland, who I first became aware of, and it's why this video is important. I first became aware of him when his name appeared on Andrew Bridgen's letter of world experts and whistleblowers. The second time I encountered him was when he was speaking with Jackie Devoid, the lady who doesn't believe in the ISS, and they did a podcast together, and it was absolutely amazing. I think I've shown this before, but this is my favourite clip. Really top notch.
You two have met before, have you? Yeah, I mean, he's one of a very few, surprisingly. It always amazes me.
It's fantastic, fantastic content. Now, I don't want to get too much into David Cartland and, you know, get into anything personal with him. This is very much about correcting the misinformation that he has presented. But I do think it's worth just talking about his Twitter presence as a whole. And I think it's fair to say that it's not always a sea of tranquility. For example, here he is calling Barack Obama a... That's a see you next Tuesday for those who need it spelling out. And why would he do that, I hear you all ask? Well, apparently Barack Obama had the sheer cheek to try and honour the memory of the victims who were lost on 9/11. Here he is calling Matthew Sweeter, seemingly because he doesn't think he'll ever make Prime Minister. Here he is calling Grant Shapps apparently Dr. Dan Goyles as well. I'm not sure who he's calling her here, because it looks as if he's replying to himself. Next up to be called her is Twitter's own misinformation debunker, John Bye. Apparently Brian Krassenstein is as well. Apparently Brent's This random guy posting about Imani Caliph is This guy said the word condensation. What a prick. The same apparently goes for one Perry Khan. I don't know who he's insulting here, whether it's the people tagged in his tweet, or whether it's the clouds in the picture. I wonder what his thoughts are on Joel Pittaway. Ah, yeah, of course. This guy here is defending a politician wearing trainers instead of shoes. Not on David's watch. And I could go on for a long time, I really could, but it is fair to point out as well that he does get an awful lot of abuse and stick himself. So I can understand somebody getting angry and lashing out, you know, in his defence. I can understand that. But I can't understand why he would post out this link here. A link that when you click on it takes you to a blog that in the first paragraph seems to deny the Manchester bombing attack ever occurred. Very, very strange and, in my opinion, thoroughly distasteful. Anyway, I think now we're safely about 6 hours into this video, so I can finally tell you what Dr. David Cartland has said that is wrong. Well, Dr. David Cartland is known on Twitter, I think it's fair to say, for questioning the narrative around the pandemic. And one of the things he often talks about is PCR, and we can see here that he's not a big fan of it. But I think that might be because Dr. David Cartland, who, remember, is one of Andrew Bridgen's either world experts or whistleblowers, it might be that he doesn't actually understand what PCR is. Let me explain. Here he is replying to somebody called the Cornish Pasty, who is denying this conspiracy claim that PCR tests can be used to find absolutely anything. Cornish Pasty is saying that's not true, it has to be there in the first place. Whereas Dr. David Cartland is saying, well, you can if you turn up the CT as high as possible, you loon. And CT, by the way, stands for cycle threshold. We'll learn a little bit more about that later on. He even accompanies his tweet with this lovely little graph here. The only problem is, for anybody who knows anything about PCR, Dr. David Cartland saying that would be like, I don't know, somebody else saying this.
If we are on a ball, where is the only place that you can stand upright? At the North Pole, yeah?
Or this.
If you were travelling from Scotland down to London on a ball, it would be downhill all the way. You wouldn't need to put any petrol in your car. You just use your brakes.
Or this.
Flat earthers are some of the dumbest people on earth.
Oh no, sorry. Yeah, I actually agree with that one. But David isn't alone in his misunderstanding and mistrust of PCR. The thing is about PCR, unless you've taken the time to understand how it actually works, some of these wild, ridiculous theories that try and discredit it might actually start to sound a little bit, I don't know, plausible. For example, one nutty theory that has grown legs and ran its shitty footprints all the way over the internet is this silly idea that PCR can be run for too many cycles. Check this out.
You can't trust PCR because there were infinite cycles, too many cycles, 40 plus cycles, 33 cycles, up to 45 cycles, over 35 cycles, too high cycles, too many cycles, even 40 cycles. The more cycles, look, there's one, they're everywhere, just too many goddamn cycles.
Now, I do believe that Dr. David Cartland, as somebody that Andrew Bridgen wants to place in front of the Chief of the Metropolitan Police, as a world expert and or whistleblower, I do believe that it is in the public interest that he does have a good grasp of PCR, especially if he's going to be tweeting out such a large following and claiming that somehow the tests are discredited or PCR is a fraud. I think it is important that he does understand it, which is why I think this video is so important. He has such a large following, and I think, you know, it's only fair to correct some of the misinformation that he comes out with. But to be fair, he's not the only doctor that also seems to misunderstand PCR. Here we have a lady doctor who appeared on GBB's who also seemed to have a little bit of a problem with what it's all about.
It shouldn't be set at more than 27 cycles. Anything above 27 cycles, it's going to be magnifying something so much it would be a false positive.
And here she is now quoting a Kerry Mullins to seemingly support David's stance that PCR isn't what it's all cracked up to be.
Kerry Mullins developed it. He said it was never to be used to test for a specific virus. You can find anything you like with a PCR test.
Well, first of all, his name was Carrie Mullis, and he absolutely did believe that PCR could be used to test for the presence of viruses. But here is what he actually said.
If they could find this virus in you at all, and with PCR, if you do it well, you can find almost anything in anybody. It starts making you believe in the sort of Buddhist notion that everything is contained in everything else, right? I mean, because if you can amplify one single molecule up to something that you can really measure, which PCR can do, then there's just very few molecules that you don't have at least one single one of them in your body, okay? So that could be thought of as a misuse of it, just to claim that it's meaningful.
Okay, let's put that into context by talking about Carrie Mullis's PCR, and we'll see if we can identify where the confusion comes in. In Carrie Mullis's PCR, you will be searching for a bit of genetic material, a target sequence. You will create primers that would fit to that genetic material, and then that would allow you to copy it to double the amount of genetic material. We will call that one cycle. This can be repeated for many cycles, and at the end of it, you would have a huge amount of genetic material. The more cycles you did, the more genetic materials you have. The people on the internet who are misunderstanding this whole issue then seem to take a little bit of a leap, and they say, well, if you do it for too many cycles, you've got loads and loads and loads of genetic material, and that might make somebody look like they were infectious when actually, in reality, that original sample only had maybe one virus particle in there or whatever. They believe that this leads to false positives. The problem that these people have is simply that we're not using Carrie Mullis's PCR in the PCR test. In about the late 1990s, I can't remember exactly which year, PCR was changed, it was improved, it was adapted, and it became something called real-time or quantitative PCR. In real-time PCR, every time a cycle occurs, every time that genetic material is copied, a fluorescent substance is released, and this fluorescence can be measured, and that's what we see on the graph here. Now, the amount of fluorescent substance released in a cycle is directly proportional to the amount of genetic material that's being copied in that cycle. So therefore, as the cycles progress and as the amount of genetic material increases, the rate at which that fluorescent substance is released also increases. Eventually, the fluorescence is being released so quickly that we hit an exponential phase and the graph shoots up. During this phase, it will pass through the threshold line, which is essentially the finish line of the PCR test. After that, you can run the PCR test for another billion, trillion, quadrillion cycles. It doesn't matter. None of that will change the number of cycles it took for the fluorescence to pass the threshold line. And the number of cycles it did take for the fluorescence to pass the threshold line is called the cycle threshold. Now, this gives us a way of quantifying how much of that genetic material was in that sample to start with. If the cycle threshold is a high number, we know there was very little genetic material in that sample. If it's a lower number, we know that there was more genetic material in that starting sample. But let's make no mistake, the cycle threshold is a result. It's not something you can turn up or turn down. It's dependent on the amount of genetic material that was in that sample when the testing began. So David's argument that he's using to try and discredit the PCR test by claiming that you can turn the cycle threshold up as high as possible and find anything makes absolutely no sense whatsoever. Anyway, if you're watching, David, I hope you found this highly educational, and maybe you might go back and correct that misconception that you had, and hopefully your faith in the PCR test will be restored. So there we have it, Dr. David Cartland, you were wrong on the internet, and I have corrected you, and whenever somebody is wrong on the internet, I'll be there.